The day I pulled into my own driveway after 2 weeks away, I thought the worst thing I'd face would be the overgrown lawn and the dust waiting inside. But instead, my jaw locked and my heart hammered when I noticed the guest house lights glowing in the late afternoon. Nobody was supposed to be there. I had locked it, double-checked it, and even pulled the blinds tight. Yet the curtains were wide open, and through the window I could see movement. At first I thought maybe it was a break-in, maybe some drifter had slipped in. I killed the engine, crouched low, and walked up the gravel path with my phone recording in my hand. The sight that greeted me when I pushed open the side door nearly made me laugh out of disbelief before rage set in. There she was, Karen, our self-appointed HOA queen, standing in my guest house kitchen like she owned the place, wearing a floral muumuu, slippers, and drinking my orange juice straight from the carton. Her purse was sprawled across my counter. My blankets were crumpled on the sofa. The smell of my coffee beans brewed in my machine was thick in the air. She looked up at me like I was the intruder. "Oh, it's you," she said, annoyed, as if I had ruined her quiet evening. "You weren't supposed to be back until next week." I was too stunned to reply at first. My property, my house, my keys, my mortgage, and this woman, who already made life hell with endless violation notices, had taken it upon herself to squat in my guest house. Before I could demand answers, she picked up her phone and in one shrill motion began dialing 911. "Yes, hello?" she said loudly enough for me to hear every word. "There's a trespasser on my property. He's threatening me right now. I need officers here immediately." I swear for a moment my vision blurred. Trespasser? On my own deeded land? My hands shook not from fear but from the sheer insanity of her lie. I tried to reason with her, telling her she was inside my guest house, that I had proof of ownership, that she needed to leave. But she wagged her finger like a schoolteacher scolding a child. "You can't talk your way out of this," she hissed. "The HOA board gave me rights to oversee unoccupied homes. This place has been empty, so I took responsibility. Now you barged in and threatened me. You'll be the one in handcuffs tonight." By the time the sirens cut through the air and the red-blue lights reflected on my walls, I knew exactly what Karen was playing at. She had no shame, no fear, and no boundaries. She thought if she got to the police first, the story would be hers, and I'd be too flustered to defend myself. But she underestimated me. I had spent years in military logistics. Every detail mattered to me. And I had receipts, surveillance cameras, and the title deed stored in both physical and digital form. As the officers approached, she ran out with her hands waving in fake panic, pointing at me as though I were an armed intruder. "That's him. He broke in here. Arrest him." The officers turned to me, eyes sharp, hands near their belts. I kept calm, lifted my phone, and played back the video I had started recording from the moment I arrived. The footage showed me unlocking the gate, walking to my guest house, finding her inside, and her call to 911. The lead officer's face tightened as he processed it. Meanwhile, Karen shrieked, "Don't believe him. That's edited. He's dangerous. Don't you see?" Her voice cracked with desperation, but cracks don't hold a collapsing wall together. When they asked me to show proof of ownership, I handed over my deed copies and utility bills with my name and address. Karen had nothing but bluster. One officer asked her, "Ma'am, do you have a lease agreement? Any documentation you live here?" She stumbled, stuttered, and finally muttered something about verbal permission from the HOA board. That's when the officer gave her a look so sharp it could slice glass. Still, she wasn't finished. As they pulled me aside to clarify statements, Karen called someone else on speakerphone. That's when the twist came. Another HOA member's voice answered. A man named Greg. He was notorious for backing Karen in every dispute. On speaker, his words spilled out, "Just stick to the story, Karen. If you hold your ground, we'll push it through the board. He won't stand a chance against us." The entire yard fell silent. The officers froze, their pens hovering over notepads. I watched Karen's face drain of color as she realized what she'd just done, put a conspiracy on record. The lead officer calmly asked her to hang up the phone. Instead she babbled, "Wait, I didn't mean was just, this is HOA business. Not police business. But the uniformed men weren't buying it anymore. One of them quietly muttered to me, "Sir, we'll handle this. Don't say another word." At that moment, I knew the tide had turned. The woman who had squatted in my guest house and tried to flip the script was digging her own grave with every frantic word. I just stood back, arms folded, letting the truth hang in the night air while her empire of lies trembled. And I couldn't help but wonder, how many neighbors had she done this to before I caught her red-handed? The silence that followed Greg's voice over the phone was deafening. The officers exchanged glances, their pens no longer moving but their eyes locked on Karen, who suddenly seemed much smaller in her oversized floral dress. She pressed the phone to her chest as if clutching it would erase what everyone had just heard. But the truth had already bled into the air, and once it was out, it could never be pulled back in. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. For once, the weight wasn't on me to prove anything. Their own arrogance had sunk them. The officer who seemed to be in charge stepped forward, his voice low and measured. "Ma'am, I need you to sit down right there on the steps. We'll get to the bottom of this." Karen resisted, arms flapping like a cornered bird, screeching about rights and authorities and community trust, but they gently, firmly steered her down. She was still trying to spin the narrative, yelling at the flashing cameras from neighbors who had gathered outside, drawn by the sirens. Yes, by then half the block had come out. Some stood with folded arms, shaking their heads. Others held phones high, recording. The neighborhood had long whispered about Karen's antics, but few dared to stand up to her. Now the spectacle was public. Her hypocrisy stripped bare in the most humiliating way possible: front yard, floodlights, and a police presence. I turned to the crowd, my voice loud enough to carry. "She broke into my guest house. She's been living in here for 2 weeks. And then she called 911 on me, the actual homeowner." Gasps rippled. Someone muttered, "I knew it." Another neighbor added, "She tried to fine me for planting tomatoes. Said they were an eyesore." A third chimed in, "She harassed my mother for hanging a wind chime. This is who she really is." It was like a dam breaking. Years of resentment poured out in murmurs and shouts. Karen, flustered and red-faced, pointed at the crowd. "Lies. All of you. I was protecting the neighborhood. This man abandoned his property, and I made sure it didn't get trashed by vagrants." The officer cut her off. "Ma'am, stop. You've said enough." But she hadn't. Not in her own mind. Her eyes darted wildly until they landed on me again. "This isn't over. The board will sue you. You think you've won, but you haven't. We're in control here. We make the rules." Her voice cracked with hysteria. She sounded less like a leader and more like a dictator whose reign had just been toppled. And then came the twist I hadn't expected. From the back of the crowd, a figure stepped forward. It was Mrs. Alvarez, a quiet elderly woman who rarely spoke in meetings. She clutched a thin folder in her hands, her posture straight despite her years. "Enough, Karen," she said in a voice that silenced the chatter instantly. "I have documents too. I've kept every single threatening letter you and Greg ever sent me. Every violation notice. Every fabricated fine. I thought I was alone, but now I see I wasn't. It's all here, and I'm giving it to the police tonight." The officers took the folder from her, flipping through the pages under their flashlights. My chest tightened as I saw their faces harden at what they read. One officer whispered something into his radio, and suddenly more cars pulled up, lights strobing. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for water. She knew it was collapsing, not just the stunt, but everything. The confrontation reached its climax when the officer announced, "Ma'am, you're under arrest for trespassing, false reporting, and obstruction." The words hit like a hammer. Karen shrieked, thrashing as they pulled her hands behind her back. "No, you can't. I'm the president of the HOA. I am the law here." Her voice cracked into sobs that turned into curses as she was led past the gawking neighbors, her slippers scraping against the gravel. For years she had made everyone else feel small. Now she was the one reduced to a pitiful spectacle. Greg, The accomplice on the phone tried to slink away into the shadows, but another officer stopped him before he reached his car. The neighbors erupted into cheers. Yes, cheers, like a crowd finally watching the villain in a long play get dragged off stage. I didn't cheer. I just felt an enormous weight lift from my chest. In the days that followed, the ripple effects shook the entire community. The local news picked up the story, the HOA president squatter scandal, they called it. Footage from the neighbors' phones went viral online. Overnight, Karen became a symbol of everything wrong with HOA corruption. Strangers across the country commented. Finally, someone stood up to one of them. At the emergency meeting that followed, the board was dissolved under court order. Neighbors volunteered to rebuild trust. Mrs. Alvarez was nominated to lead a new, temporary committee, one based on fairness and actual community spirit. I offered my guest house for gatherings. Once it had been thoroughly disinfected and freed of the sour odor Karen left behind. Yet the most powerful moment came a week later. A teenager from down the block, who had once been fined for skateboarding near the cul-de-sac, came up to me with wide eyes. "Thanks, mister," he said softly. "She always scared us. Now we don't have to be afraid anymore." I ruffled his hair and felt something shift inside me. This was bigger than me. It was about ending a reign of fear, one lie at a time. Karen's downfall was bitter. She lost not just her title, but her reputation, her grip on people, even her freedom. But her collapse gave birth to something stronger in USA sense that no one, no matter how loud or intimidating, had the right to abuse power unchecked. And as I stood one evening on my porch, watching the sunset burn gold over the rooftops, I realized the truest victory wasn't Karen's arrest or the viral videos. It was the way the neighborhood began to breathe again, neighbors waving, kids playing freely, gardens sprouting without fear of fines. Community had been restored, not by fear, but by standing together. What started as one woman squatting in my guest house ended as a community reclaiming its dignity. And maybe that's the greatest justice of all. So tell me, was I right to let the evidence and the truth bring her down? Or should I have fought fire with fire the moment she tried to steal what was mine? Share your thoughts. Was this justice served? Or should it have gone even further?